Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 176. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, Dr. Norge on the comic forums, and I'm joined by a special guest this episode, Leroy Rivera from the Comic Tube podcast, as we discuss in depth the Batman Arkham Asylum video game. Jim and I have been working with Mandy to finish up our Superman for Tomorrow episode. And because of the fact that we're both in the beginning of our school years, it's been scheduling. We've been having some trouble getting that together to finish up that episode. No big deal. We're going to definitely finish it up over the next two shows. We also have been using this time because we realized that we were going to have a little bit of a gap there, that we're doing a very special Superman episode coming up next week on Codename Patriot. And along with that episode, we're also going to have some Speeding Bullets and some of the other comics we've been enjoying. And Leroy and I actually recorded a Batman segment that we're going to air on that episode as well. So we've got a lot going on over the next couple weeks to give you Superman content and get everything back on track as far as that's concerned. But this provided me with a unique opportunity. Jim doesn't have a game system, so I thought it would be fun. Leroy had emailed me and said, hey, if you're planning on doing an Arkham Asylum segment, consider counting me in. And because Jim didn't have a game system, I wasn't really thinking of doing anything other than a very small segment. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to take a look at the history of Batman games early on in this segment, because it's been kind of a unique history, both good and bad, to show how gaming's changed over that time. But also to talk about what we might want out of a sequel of this game and what we're hoping for the future of Batman games out of this particular one. So it was great, and I want to thank Leroy again because he provided a unique opportunity for me to get an episode to you guys that's unique in nature. Like I said, our next episode is going to be focused on Superman's Codename Patriot, this big crossover that we got going on with Codename Patriot, because it's excellent and we really want to talk about it, and we're doing some Speeding Bullets as well. Then we're going to come back and finish off for tomorrow. That is coming. It's just been, like I said, for the beginning of the school year for both Mandy and myself, scheduling has been kind of crazy, so we want to make sure to give ourselves some ample time to finish that. And we've used the time well to give you some bonus content coming up with Codename Patriot. Our sponsors for this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, you can pre-order Cinderella from Fabletown with Love, #1. Special discount, limit 2 at 75% off. It's regularly $2.99, 75% off, as I just mentioned, only 74 cents. This is written by Chris Robertson, art by Sean McManus, cover by Chrissy Zulio. When supernatural artifacts from the homelands begin surfacing in the modern world, it falls to Cinderella, Fabletown's best-kept and best-dressed secret agent, to stop the illegal trafficking. But can Cindy foil the dark plot before Fabletown and its hidden exiled inhabitants are exposed once and for all? And how does her long-lost fairy godmother factor into the equation? Whether she's soaring through the clouds, deep-sea diving, or cracking jaws, Cindy travels from Manhattan to Dubai and hooks up with a handsome, familiar accomplice who may be harboring secret motives of his own. Meanwhile, trouble brews back home in Fabletown when Cindy's overworked, underappreciated assistant decides to seize control of the glass slipper. Cindy's exclusive shoe boutique. Written by Chris Robertson, contributor to House of Mystery and Jack of Fables, and artist Sean McManus, Sandman Thessaly, Witch for Hire. And evocative new cover painter Chrissy Zulio, they deliver Cindy's first major solo adventure. Replete with sex, spies, and magical shoes in this 6-issue Cinderella from Fabletown with Love. And like I said, that's $2.99 regularly, 75% off, only 74 cents. One of the things I really like personally about these Fables side stories is that they can be read independently. The hardcovers have been the same way, and it's great that there's another opportunity then to kind of jump on board Fables if you haven't been reading it before. Fables is one of my absolute favorite Vertigo series, and if you haven't checked it out, consider checking out this miniseries as a way to have a jumping on point. After we are finished with For Tomorrow, which is going to be in a couple weeks, we're going to jump to Preacher Book 1's hardcover. It features more blood and blasphemy than any mainstream comic in memory. This one is written by Garth Ennis and artist Steve Dillon. It's regularly, if you want to pick up the hardcover, it's regularly $39.99, 47% off, only $21.19, Or you can pick up Volume 1 and 2 in trade, $14.99 regularly, 47% off, only $7.94 each. And like I said, we're going to, right after we finish up with For Tomorrow, we're going to skip a week and do some speeding bullets to kind of keep up with the current comics and jump right back and do Preacher. The hardcover has issues 1 through 12. The trades, if you decide to go that route and pick up the 2 trades at $7.94 each, you get the first 17 issues. So there's a nice budget. Or there's a nice premium hardcover, depending on which route you want to go. I want to thank friend of the show, InStockTrades.com, for continuing to support our listeners with those 47% off discounts on those great series. And like I said, we'll be getting to that in just a few weeks. Please remember to check out RagingBullets.com. I actually got more contest entries. Our regular column, Life in the Gutter, Mandy just updated that as well. There's some sketches up there. There's a news Where Whatnot Now. If you want to participate, we're always looking for website content or show content. If you want to send in an audio comment for the show or sketches or any idea, you might have an idea for something, a new column. You just want to send in a particular rant or rave that you would like to post on the website about a particular book that you're enjoying. Any of those things all go to our show contest. With our first Preacher episode, we're actually going to pick our next contest winner. And that person is going to get to pick what the book is we do after Preacher and join us just like Mandy's been joining in multiple segments where we dissect whatever book that they choose. So this is a great opportunity and shout out to get those contest entries in if you would like to be a part of that segment and have a chance to join us. So I want to thank everyone who's been sending in contest entries. Check out the website to see some of the new content up there from our listeners. I love the community aspect of our show, so I want to thank everyone for doing that. That's ragingcontest@gmail.com if you want to participate in that. I also want to tell everyone that voicemails and emails are definitely back our next episode. They would have been on this show, but I wanted to have Jim be a part of that, so we will definitely have those back on our next episode. I've got a bunch of emails I actually want to share and some voicemails as well, so we got a whole bunch of listener content that's going to be a part of our next episode as well. So, without further ado, let's talk about Batman in video games. I also want to special notice, this is spoiler-filled. If you are currently playing the game and you don't want to know how the game ends, you're probably going to want to skip this segment until you're done with the game and come back and join us. The reason why we went spoiler-filled on this one is because we're figuring that there's going to be people listening to this that don't have a PlayStation 3 or an Xbox 360, and they want to know what the game's all about. And the best way to keep everyone kind of on the same page is to let them know the stories and the ins and outs of this game. So we go really in depth and dissect this game to talk about some of our favorite elements, our favorite boss battles, things like that. So if you haven't solved the game yet, our goal here isn't to ruin it for you. It's kind of a celebration of what was so cool about the game for people that have solved it already. And if you haven't, why don't you come back and join us when you have done that, and this segment will be perfect for you at that point. But for listeners who don't have any of those game systems, we crafted this in a way that hopefully will make this very accessible for you as well. It is, again, spoiler-filled. We go all the way through the whole game, including the ending of it. So it's a pretty heavy-duty dissection of what made this a cool Batman game. Because I do think this is one of the best games, period, I've ever played, but certainly one of the best superhero games I've ever played. So hopefully you enjoy this.
Nothing like the handy-dandy electro claw for carving through metal doors.
The next segment we're going to do is Arkham Asylum, which is published by IDOS and developed by the gods at Rocksteady. And joining me on this one is Leroy Rivera, a.k.a. Ziggo from the forums and host of the Comic Tube podcast. Leroy, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me on.
Just as a quick overview, what did you think of this game? I was blown away. I mean, it's really good.
Words can't describe how I feel. The best thing I can describe it is that they finally got not just a Batman game right, but they finally got a superhero game right.
Yeah, where it really feels like that. Because, I mean, my history with Batman games, I kind of wanted, I was going to say this for the end, but it kind of makes sense to kick off here. Yeah. I've played mediocre Batman games, such as, like, Dark Tomorrow, which storyline-wise, did you play that at all, or get to even...
I think I borrowed it from, because that's the one that came for PlayStation 2, right?
No, that one came out for GameCube and the original Xbox. And it was a comic book based storyline. So it had the Cassandra Cain Batgirl. It had all of the players that you would expect from the comic book. So, in premise, it even had a comic book that was released that was like a lead in to it. So you could read the comic book, then go play the game. So all of the elements were there for what we've all been screaming for anyway, a game that felt like you were playing the comic book. The big problem with it was the camera was awful. So,
really?
Yeah, gameplay in itself, like if you actually could play it, the gameplay when you were able to play those elements, it all made sense. It played well. But the camera was so bad that most of the time you couldn't see Batman, or you couldn't see what you were fighting, or it was just you were fighting with the camera throughout the game that no matter how cool the story was, it always felt like a battle just to play the game, and not in the way that you want to feel like you're battling the villains, not the game. Which was the frustration of it, and it was the only reason why I say mediocre versus god awful is because of the fact that the storyline itself was very cool because it was so comic based, and that's the only thing that gives it a little bit of points. But other than that, it was close to unplayable, at least in my opinion. There was Vengeance and Rise of Sinzu.
I think that's the one I'm thinking of. Rise of Sinzu is the one I had for PlayStation 2.
That was the one where Jim Lee created the original villain.
Okay.
Which it was based on the animated series. Is that what you're thinking of?
I think so. Yeah, Nightwing was in it also. They had the animated Nightwing in it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's the one.
Now, those I thought were okay because they were based off the animated features. They played well. Didn't blow me away or anything, but I considered them like fun diversions. I don't know what your experience was. They were basic beat 'em ups where it really could have been any characters except for Batman and Nightwing, and you would have gotten the same game. They reminded me of those. They were playable, but there was nothing that made it have to be a Batman game other than that the storyline was Batman themed, if that makes sense.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, and also I like one of the games that, and I feel terrible for bashing on this game, the Batman Beyond game for PlayStation 1. I played it for 10 minutes and I gave it back to a friend of mine. Like, I don't even want this.
Now, what?
That bad.
Because see, usually from what ends up happening for me, and the reason why, like I said, for Dark Tomorrow, for example, the reason why I said it was mediocre, I actually played it all the way through. Right. It hurt to play it all the way through. I did end up selling because I'm like, all right, I'm glad I played it through just because I got to the end of it and I thought the storyline was cool, but the game was like such a nightmare to play that I never want to play it again. What was it with Batman Beyond that made you just want to get rid of it right away? Because that's one I did not play.
The controllers were a little tough for me, and I don't know. It was for PlayStation 1, and of course at the time, PlayStation 1, when you're playing these PlayStation 1 games, you're expecting these revolutionary graphics and stuff. Yeah. It looked like a Super Nintendo game. Wow! It was 2D scroller, and I was like, okay. But that's fine because I'm a Castlevania fan, and to this day, if you give me a 2D scroller Castlevania game, I'm happy with it. But it was just something about it that was just it didn't even feel like the actual Batman Beyond the cartoon. It was just okay, there's Batman and just punch, punch, punch. There was no story. Everything was like reader. There wasn't any dialogue or anything. It was.
I get totally what you're saying. There wasn't a mood and an atmosphere or even a gameplay element that made you feel like you were Batman.
Right.
That was one of the things, especially at that stage. You're right. Castlevania is a great example. 2D side-scrollers had been so well done for so long that it's really almost inexcusable by the time the PlayStation 1 era hit to have a 2D side-scroller that wasn't anything but perfect.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, and again, but going back, like Castle, this is a little sidetracking here, not a Batman game, but what's the name of that Castlevania game? Symphony of the Night. It was a 2D scroller, but it's one of the best PlayStation games out there.
I have it on my PlayStation 3. I actually downloaded it because they re-put it out, and I'm like, you know what? It's such a good game that I know I'll play. And I have played it through again since I downloaded it. So, I mean, that's the funny thing for me, and I guess the point of why I wanted to jump into some of the previous games, for me not to complete a Batman game or for me not to want to replay a Batman game says a lot, because I'm an easy sell on a Batman game. I love Batman enough that I will play the worst Batman game just to play it. But, for me to say, I'm going to dump this one. That's why this one, when we talk about it in a minute, was such a pleasure because of the fact that it had everything I've ever wanted that has seemed to never be there. Lego Batman. Did you play Lego Batman at all?
No, actually, I want to get that game. I just haven't had the time to pick it up. I played the demo and I loved it.
Yeah, I've got nothing bad to say about this game. My opinion is either you like Lego games or you don't. If you've played Lego Star Wars or Lego Indiana Jones, it's that style of game. The only thing is the gadgets and the gizmos and all that. This actually does feel like a Batman game. The only catch is it feels more like a family-friendly Batman game. It's kind of a nod back almost to the 60s television show in its storyline style because there's humor sprinkled throughout and all that. It's not quite as over the top as that show, but it is definitely geared more as a family-friendly game. I love it. It's one of those that my wife and I have played it together. It's something when friends come over, I wouldn't mind putting it, because especially if your friend's not a gamer, it's real easy to pick up and play. So Lego Batman is definitely one for a lighter type of game. I have nothing bad to say about.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about the Lego games. They're all kid-friendly. They're all family-friendly, so that's no shock. And that's actually really cool. I heard that Nightwing was an unlockable character in the game.
Yeah, and so is Batgirl.
Oh, that's cool.
And there's a lot of unlockable characters because it has the option. There's specific levels that are geared to play as the heroes, and there's specific levels that are geared to play as the villains.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and the game plays very easy, but to unlock everything, that's the part where it's going to take you a little bit more time to go through and unlock everything and complete all the challenges in the game. But there's a lot of atmosphere and mood. The Batcave being used as a base of operations for the game, but then switching over to the villain's hideout is also a great thing. So it's that one. That's a game I would recommend. The only thing I would say for people who are playing Arkham Asylum and looking for another Batman fix, this is definitely a lighter, like you said, family-friendly game, which if you're looking for that, you'll be incredibly satisfied. It's also a lot easier than this game.
Oh, yeah.
Batman Returns for the Super Nintendo. Now, this is different than the Genesis versions. The Genesis versions were made by Sega. This one was actually made by Konami. This was actually a really cool 2D side-scroller. It was completely based on the Batman movie by the same name with the Penguin and Catwoman. It had fantastic graphics for the time. It's Super Nintendo graphics. So at the time, it really did a good job of using that system. It had a good challenge to it, but it played well. So it's one of those that when people talk about that there haven't been really good Batman games before, this one was good. It was a solid game. It wasn't like the greatest game I ever played of all time, but it also wasn't one of those I wouldn't put in like a mediocre category. It was a good game. I played it through a few times. It's one of those that like if it became a downloadable game again, I would repurchase it to play it again. I don't have my Super Nintendo anymore, but I would easily repurchase this game because I thought it was good enough.
Yeah, for the Super Nintendo, the Batman game that I played was actually the one after that, Batman Forever for Super Nintendo.
How was that one?
Well, I was a little kid, and that's like shortly after the movie came out, so I just wanted my Batman fix, and I liked it. It felt like the Ninja Turtles games for Super Nintendo.
Okay.
That type of style, side-scroller, of course, but it was actually pretty good. But then again, at the time, I'm a little kid. I don't care about the storyline or anything. All I knew is that, okay, I'm Batman, and I gotta punch that dude.
That was made by Acclaim at the time.
That was made by Acclaim, yeah. Also, you had, like, I remember vaguely there were little Riddler signs all over the place and stuff, because, of course, this was the Riddler's introduction in the movie continuity universe, so.
Yeah, that's cool. So it actually tied into the movie. But, I mean, it was enough that you're sitting here saying, hey, my experiences were that I remember it being a decent enough game. So,
yeah.
Sunsoft, in my opinion, were gods of the Batman games. During the 8-bit Nintendo, the original Nintendo, and the 16-bit era, the Genesis era, they made a series of games based on the original Batman movie. It actually was the same game, but they updated it from the 8-bit graphics to the Genesis graphics and re-released it. It's another one, like, if it becomes a downloadable game or if you end up finding a Genesis cheap or something, because those game systems you can pick up pretty cheap. For anybody who hasn't played it, if you liked the original Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson movie, this plays extremely well. It's another 2D side-scroller, but it really pushed, at the time, it pushed the bar on what the original 8-bit Nintendo could do. And then when they re-released it, they didn't just like do a hack job of it. They really completely went through the entire game and completely updated the graphics engine to match the Sega Genesis. But because the gameplay was already so good, they didn't have to do anything to the gameplay. They just left it a really cool-looking 2D side-scroller that played very well. It was a great game. And that's probably my fondest memories of a Batman game is that game. Because I remember playing that over and over and over again. A lot of challenge. It was very difficult to beat the whole game at the time, at least from my memory. Maybe that, but because I was young when the 8-bit one came out, but
Right.
it was. I liked it enough that I bought it again on the Genesis. So that says a lot for that game.
That's really cool. Is that the one where when they showed Michael Keaton's Batman, they kind of gave him like a really big head? There was one game, I don't remember which one. They gave the Michael Keaton Batman a really big Michael Keaton head, and I'm like, oh, and little body.
No, at the time, it was one of those games that really pushed the limits of the 8-bit Nintendo, the original 8-bit Nintendo, and the graphics were pretty near perfect. They looked like they were pulled directly from the film, so there was nothing where I was like, "Wow, he looks deformed" or anything. Because I would have mentioned that and talking about this, that had been something that stuck out. But they made so many different games based on the Michael Keaton movies, because there were a ton of games based on Batman Returns. So I'm wondering if it isn't one of those. Actually, if anybody listening to this knows, post in our forums, either the Comic Tube or the Raging Bullets forums, and let us know which game it was.
Yeah, I don't remember. Because like I said, these games came out earlier, and when I had the Nintendo and Super Nintendo, I was like 5, so it's all a big blur to me.
So that being said, even though I've said that there's, some of the games were mediocre or blah, or Dark Tomorrow, there actually have been some Batman games that I've considered okay. Some that I've considered good, and then some that were in the great category. This goes beyond any of those categories on so many levels. Arkham Asylum. The basic story is the Joker has escaped from Arkham, and Batman quickly catches him. At Arkham, there's this cool opening where Bruce walks with Gordon and the guards, but you have control of him, so you can join them or even explore the surroundings. Now, ultimately, you need to follow them to progress, but I liked the feeling that you were still in control in those segments, because the credits were rolling, the characters were still talking, meaning Gordon and the other police officers, and even the Joker at that point were still talking, but it still felt like I was Batman at those moments, and I really liked that feel of the whole thing.
Yeah, it's really great, because it's like, I want to explore Arkham out here, but at the same time I want to know what they're saying, and if you're far away from them, you can't hear their conversations.
And I liked the fact, though, that as you moved away, you could still hear them, but it was getting fainter and fainter. It was just a great game engine in the sense that, and that's throughout the game. If you are away from monitors or speakers or things like that are pumping out the sound, you actually notice a sound difference, which added to the whole atmosphere and mood of the game, that they were coming out of these different spots versus it just being able to hear it in your ear or something like that.
One thing from the beginning that I loved, actually, it's in the opening credit sequence. First off is they took something out of the Christopher Nolan Batman universe, where the Batlight was like more realistic in terms of you can see it in the clouds in the sky.
Oh, yeah.
When the opening shot, it was a beautiful opening, because you just see the sky and you're seeing a light, but then when the cloud moves into place, you actually see that it's actually the Batlight shining on that, and I thought that was like, oh wow, that's actually really cool.
This is a very dark game in its atmosphere. It's more of a mature. This actually is based directly on the comic book universe versus anything else. But you're right, there are elements that feel very Batman Begins or Dark Knight as well. But it's very rooted in the comic book world. I liked that. I mean, if you're talking about it's the antithesis of Lego Batman as far as this one. I would be very careful giving it to the little kids if they scare easily, because this is borderline a horror film.
Oh yeah. Oh, and I'll get to that later when we get to Scarecrow, but I'll get to that comparison.
Yeah. But even the atmosphere inside Arkham itself, aside from the entryway, as you get deeper into that place, the actual facility is downright creepy. It's
not even that. It's the facility. It's actually the type of people they have here. Because what I loved about this in general is the actual people that you fight. They don't just have the typical Batman villains. I mean, yeah, of course, when people think of Arkham Asylum, you're gonna think of all the top Batman villains. You're gonna think of Joker. You're gonna think of Poison Ivy. You're gonna think of Two-Face. But what I like about this is that they had 2 or 3 of the major characters and just a whole bunch of random thugs who were actually crazy. You get to a point where you actually get these really crazed out psycho killers, and it's like, oh my god, wow.
And it would make sense that the Joker would hire people. And it's everything that happens is very story driven. So there's a reason all these thugs are there. There's a reason, there's a transfer that's going on. I liked that you're like, okay, why are all these people there? That's explained in the story. That was one of the strengths of this game, that it never took you out of like, okay, this has just gone way over the top. No, everything was there with a point. Great script writing for this game.
Well, Paul Dini wrote the game, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, I mean, Paul Dini is, in my opinion, one of the best Batman writers out there. He gave us the 1990s Batman animated series, or took a major part in that, so, yeah.
Well, and the voices, if you talk about it, let's talk about that. We've got Batman. It's Kevin Conroy is back again. The Joker is Mark Hamill. And, of course, Harley Quinn is also, it's Arlene Sorkin, I believe is her name. And I apologize if that's the wrong name. But all three of those characters are directly taken from the Batman the Animated Series. Their voices are back again. Yeah. And that added a lot to the atmosphere and mood as well.
Also Commissioner Gordon.
Yeah.
Commissioner Gordon's original voice is there.
Bruce shares with Gordon in the storyline that catching his old foe seemed too easy. And of course it was. Joker planned to take over Arkham and to trap Batman inside. But it's not only that. He has sinister plans for pulling the ultimate joke on Gotham with his new attempt to kill all of its citizens using the research of Arkham's own Dr. Young. And this whole story kicks off right from there. And that little bit that we just talked about was just the opening. The opening salvo to this really intense game. The non-player characters, you started talking about them, they still carry on when you finish saving them. Not just the bad guys, but the good guys. Because that opening with the officers held by Zsasz being talked down wasn't necessary, but it made this world feel like a living world, because you could actually go and walk over in the area where you could see there was a psychologist over there interviewing him. There was another police officer there, looking over the crime scene, because Zsasz basically, thanks to the Joker, got an opportunity to get an upper hand and that happens throughout the game. The major Bat villains that are put into place are there because the Joker either is trying to stop Batman from finding out his plans too soon, or just having a blast throwing things at Batman for his own entertainment. And that, to me, is a nice little consistency to the Joker, because he will do random things, just including set Batman on his thugs without telling his thugs that he's coming, because he thinks it's funny.
Throughout the whole game, I mean, as you're doing it, he's like, "Oh, Batman, take it easy on them, will you? You know what? Do your worst. I don't care." And he just starts laughing at him. Yeah. It's so terrible. It's like, oh my god. And hearing Mark Hamill as the Joker back in this game is just it brings a smile to my face, because one of my major influences to Batman, and especially general comic books, basically where I am right now, is because of the 1990s Batman cartoon. I grew up with that, and Mark Hamill has made such an impact on me in terms of being the Joker's voice in terms of animated, that when I read comic books, I actually hear his voice. So I thought that was just really great that they actually got him to be in this game, and as well as Kevin Conroy, of course.
I think Mark Hamill has captured the ultimate comic book Batman. He did that throughout that series, and really that is carried on into this game, where you really see this. And I'm not saying that's nothing against Heath Ledger's version or Jack Nicholson's version, or even Cesar Romero. I enjoyed all of those versions in their own ways for what they did. But this felt totally comic book to me. It felt like he was being pulled right out of the pages of the books. And that's an element, like, right every time he'd pop over the speakers, I would literally stop in the game and make sure that I listened to every little word that he said, because it was so entertaining to hear the Joker talk.
Yeah. And also, like, when he's talking to a thug, I wouldn't beat them up. I would wait for him to finish, and then I'll jump in and fight.
Well, and you were also doing that because it's polite.
Yeah, I just want to wait. I just, you know what? As Batman, let me just wait. Let him finish his conversation. Sneak down. Okay.
Yeah, because he could be talking to them. He could be talking to me. Whatever. Let's just be polite. Yeah. I actually did those. I'm like, this is the stupidest thing. In the middle of a game, I'm rushing to a view screen to see the Joker talking. Because every so often he'd be on a monitor, so you could actually see him talking. I'm like, I should be continuing on with the mission, but no, I want to stop and watch the Joker.
Yeah. Not even that. Every so often, I would go into the visitor center. If you went in before, he would talk to you, and I would go there just to see, hey, do you have anything to say? Okay, cool. Hi, how are you?
And there's nothing else to do in the visitor center except go and listen to the Joker talk.
Exactly. So
because he taunts you in there.
Yeah, and you're in first-person view.
Right.
Speaking of taunting, actually, one of my favorite moments in the game is right around the beginning, or right when Batman finally, in the beginning, Joker escapes. When Batman finally catches on to him, before he releases the first Titan on you, I love how Joker taunts him, and it's like, you know what, Batman, take your shot, kill me. You can stop this right now. You're too predictable, and he just, and Batman hesitated there because that shows you what type of person Joker is, where he knows that Batman won't kill him because Batman doesn't kill.
And it is the psychological battle between the two of them that plays out in this game so well. When you talked about the Titans are jacked up on Venom, a new version of Venom that has been developed by Dr. Young. And little did she know that she was being financed by Mr. White, a.k.a. the Joker. And I love that throughout the story there's detective work going on by Batman, as he's trying to get a handle on what's actually going on in this particular place. But what happens is this new version of Venom jacks up and makes them into these, insane fighting machines. Like what Bane is, but taken to the next level.
Yeah. Oh, not even that. It's to the point where you only need one shot of it. Because with Bane, you need a consistent flow of Venom.
Right.
And they explained that with this one, you don't need that consistent Venom. You just have one shot, and you're souped up and ready to go.
Of course, it changes you forever.
Yeah.
Which becomes a big problem throughout the game, because that's something that Batman has to find a way to overcome because of the danger of what the Joker wants to do with that. Basically, he wants this to be his new Joker Venom for all extensive purposes. I loved the gadgets in the game, and one of the things that I really loved about the gadgets in the game was they weren't just there, because in previous Batman games, they had gadgets, and in most cases, not all of them, but in most cases, when you had Batman gadgets, they were there just to make it feel like a Batman game, but they didn't really have a necessary functionality. You could do those things, but you're more than likely usually best served by just hitting the punch button. In this game, in order to actually beat the game, in order to get to all the areas you need to get to, you actually have to use all of the Batman gadgets. Not only that, due to the combo system, there become some great opportunities to implement his gadgets in battle that actually become necessary when you're fighting large squads of thugs in order to get, especially to get some of the trophies that are in the game, or, you have to be able to use the Batarang, for example, in combination a lot of times to be able to get to the level that you want to, which I thought was really great. I felt like in the game there's the Batarang, the grappling gun, actually multiple grappling guns with modifications along the way. There's a sonic Batarang, a very cool remote control Batarang. I know on the PlayStation 3, if you hit the R2 button, not any of the gadgets, but most of the gadgets that you use, you'll actually be able to zoom in and follow the gadget where it goes, which I thought was a very cool element of the game, that the camera actually followed the gadget if you wanted it to.
Yeah, and the great thing is you can also use all these gadgets on people you're fighting as well. You also forgot to mention the little stun C4 type detonator thing. I forgot.
Oh yeah, it was. He's got his own bat explosives. It's an explosive, and the cool thing is when he puts that on a surface, you're right. It's like a C4 compound. When he puts it on a surface, he actually puts it on the surface in a bat symbol. I love that while I'm talking about this, I'm drawing the symbol with my finger, like anybody can see this. But it's actually that's the cool thing. You can actually see the bat symbol. But as the game progresses, you learn the ability to you can put it on 3, 4, 5, 6 different surfaces, but then you can target which one you want to detonate. So you can either have them all detonate at once, you can have them detonate as you want them to by selecting those targets, which makes it really cool for some stealth gameplay. Because one of the strengths of this, and it's something we'll talk about throughout this, I love the fact that you can do the same area all over again, play the game through all over again, and play it completely differently than you played it the previous time. Because there's a lot of freedom in how you behave as Batman, like how you take down the thugs. I also like that he doesn't kill.
No, it's all knockout. One great thing is that in terms of that, you have this vision, and I'm not sure if they took it from. I'm not sure if he had this in the comics, but I remembered it straight from the Dark Knight movie, where he had that sonar vision, but it was enhanced for the game where you can see your opponent's nervousness, like if they're nervous, if they're calm, their vital signs.
Right.
if they're unconscious or not, and it helps you detect things in the wall. It helps you figure out, okay, this wall you can probably put like a plaster gel here and blow it up, and I think it's great.
You can also tell who has weapons.
Yeah, you can tell who has weapons, who's scared, who's nervous. One of the things, if you don't mind me, is that this game has 3 modes, and in these 3 modes is what makes you actually feel like Batman. It has a combat mode, which actually it features combat moves, punch, kick, and it features Batman's best martial arts moves. And throughout, depending, as you upgrade, different combat moves can do different Batman things. Like he can flip you over, hit you with a batarang, break your arm, break your leg, and just knock you out cold, which I think is pretty cool. One other mode, which we were talking about right now, is Predator mode. And the one thing I love about Predator mode is that this is Batman at his finest. You're hiding from these people, and you're slowly taking them out one by one, whether you're on top of a gargoyle and you drop down and tie them up, or you knock them out with a batarang and punch them, or you knock a wall down. You're slowly starting to strike fear into these people, which I thought was really awesome.
And I love the inverted takedown.
Oh, yeah.
You can shoot up on top of these gargoyles, and you can stalk these guys, watch them walk underneath you, zap down and pull them up, wrapping your cape around them like you've seen them do so many times, and then leave them hanging from the gargoyle. The cool part is, I love that the other characters don't ignore this. They have all these characters have collars on them that start going off because they're inmates when one of them is incapacitated. So the others are alerted to it. They go to that area, and they actually acknowledge the fact that they don't cut him down because they're afraid while they're doing that that'll give Batman the chance to take them down. So they keep saying things like, we'll come back and get you afterwards, or that type of gist. It's said differently every time, but I liked that there was that little tiny acknowledgement. Yeah. I'm gonna say one minor tiny gripe I have about the game, and this is a game that I think is fabulous, but when we're talking about when he's behaving in stealth behavior, my one small gripe with the game, the silent takedown when you walk up behind a guy, I think is fabulous. My only gripe is, though, the non-player characters, the NPCs, the thugs, they sometimes do not sometimes, when the 2 guys are next to each other, depending on their positioning, you can take down one guy and not alert the other one when there is no rhyme or reason why they shouldn't be alerted.
Well, it depends on what mode are you playing that on.
I'm playing it in the regular game, in the Predator mode, but I'm talking about 2 guys that are directly next to each other. I've been able to take down 2 guys that are directly next to each other. I'll take down one in the silent mode, then the other in the silent mode, but they're so close together, how would you not notice that the guy went down? And wait, I'm saying this is a minor gripe, because that's the only time in the game that I ever found fault with anything, because it's a fabulous game. Matter of fact, I'll go on the record and say this is as a Batman fan, this is pretty much Batman perfection. So it's not a knock on the game. It's just an honest commentary on one little part of it. I don't think they're aware, because of the fact that they can't be aware that Batman's coming up behind them. I think the way that those characters react, they're not sensitive enough to the fact that their buddy just got taken down and they were basically standing next to each other.
That's really funny. I never tried that. I was too afraid to because I thought they would do it. One comparison.
They don't. In most cases, they don't acknowledge each other.
Wow. What one great thing, going back to Predator mode, as you're taking them all one by one of my favorite modes in Predator mode, and this is strictly on Predator mode, is that once there's 2 left, their status goes, when they're normal, before they know Batman's there, they're in calm mode. Their vital signs are calm. Then they start getting nervous, and then when there's like 2 or 3 left, or maybe 2, sometimes 2 at most, 1, they start getting terrified. And they start like walking around and shooting at random areas because they think Batman is next to them. And I think it's fantastic because they start saying classic lines like, "What are you? What are you doing? Where's the bat? I don't know." And I really, that right there is what made me go, you know what? This is at the very peak is where I really feel like Batman.
As the game goes on, to actually go in the other direction, I made a small gripe, but one of the areas where I think the non-player characters work so well, in that same positioning you're talking about, later in the game when you start running into those rooms where there's 7, 8 guys in the room, and you start taking a couple of them down, they start partnering up.
Yeah.
And they walk around together watching each other's backs, which makes it then harder for you to take them down because you've got to find ways to catch them when they briefly separate. if that's possible at certain times. So it does make it harder because these guys with machine guns, I love that there is a difference between a guy carrying a machine gun and a guy carrying a club or just plain fists. They are dangerous. They can oh god, we can get even when we get into that shock that they can do. They've got basically a stun baton. Those characters really are tough to take down, and you have to be very careful how you do it. So guns and the stun baton actually up the ante on those characters and up the reasons why Batman, because he's only one man, has to behave in a certain way to take these characters down. And I loved that feel of it. So, ignore my minor gripe from earlier. When you take a look at this, these characters start to behave very smart when the ante is upped. And that's something that, for me, I thought was a strength of this game.
No, yeah, it's fantastic. And not only that, it's just, it forces you to play stealth, because once you go in there without being stealth, 2 shots, you're dead. One great game that I like to compare this to, and I've made a joke with it with my friends, is I like to call this game Batman Gear Solid.
Oh yeah,
because it's like Metal Gear Solid, and that is a great compliment, because Metal Gear Solid is one of my personal favorite games for PlayStation, and I love that.
Even more so, Metal Gear Solid 4. The current Resident Evil and Resident Evil 4 and Dead Space, the recent release Dead Space, all of those games have something in common with this game. They're those third-person, over-the-shoulder type games, which they really seem to have perfected the gameplay to this style of game. But yet, while it borrows elements from all of those, they didn't feel – you're right, it feels like, Batman Gear Solid, but the key word there is Batman.
Exactly.
And they modified the mechanics in such a way that they took the elements from Metal Gear that would make sense in a Batman game and that would fit the mood and the atmosphere of Batman, but they also modified that type of game system to fit the character in place. Where they did, I think if they made a real good Batman Metal Gear game, we would have been happy and said, wow, this is really a good, Batman game. But this takes it to the next level, because not only did they pull a mechanic system similar to that, but they did modify it in such a way that it totally fits the character that we're playing as.
Oh yeah, definitely, perfectly. I mean, like I said, this is the one Batman game where I actually felt like Batman, and the third playing mode that I like in this that completes it, because we already mentioned combat mode, predator mode, detective mode. Mm-hmm. Detective mode is one of my favorite things, because it reminds you, and I think they took this element from Metroid, where the Metroid series for Nintendo, stuff like that, is that with the sonar vision, you're able to detect certain things. For example, one example is when they kidnap Commissioner Gordon and you're trying to trace him, you scan his pipe and you scan the residue smoke in the air, and then you follow that around to see where Gordon is. Same thing with the DNA with Dr.
You're talking about the doctor that was behind this whole thing, Dr. Young?
Yeah, when he's tracing her DNA to get to her, when he's trying to get to the warden, all these things through different. The first guard that turned against Commissioner Gordon, you were able to trace him back using his alcohol, and I that's really great. A
lot of times, that the detective mode initially is calibrated through conversations with Oracle, who is a great supporting character in this game. Oracle fans, he's constantly in contact with her, using her because he doesn't have access to his computers at certain times in the game. He's using her basically as his go-to for information. So I like that it doesn't feel like we've got the thug Batman. A violent fighting Batman who has no detective skills. That's not what this game's all about. It's about being the complete Batman. Yes, there's a lot of combat and fighting in the same way that you would see Batman fighting and in combat in the comic books. But there are a ton of, as you're mentioning, great detective moments, great detective elements throughout that I think are equally as cool and interesting and as important as the combat elements. There's a lot of times where you really are just searching around for clues and using those clues to lead you to new situations. And that to me it keeps the game from feeling too linear. It's got a linear story like a comic book would normally have, but there's a lot of freedom in as far as you can, while you're in the middle of searching for some clues, you can, if you see a trouble going on along the way or something like that, you can actually zip off, take care of that trouble, and then come back and retrace your steps, follow right where you left off with following that particular clue. I liked the freedom of that. Even though you're following a linear film-like story, you weren't so locked into, felt like you were walking down a corridor the whole time. there really is a lot of branches you can choose to go off of and handle situations in a certain way. And the Riddler, I think that's a good time to talk about the Riddler mode. One of the things that has been around since some of the great Mario games, you can beat the game without getting 100% in the game, without catching all the things that are in the game. Rather than just having hidden objects in the game with no attachment to the story, because they were in Arkham Asylum, they put out this whole premise that the Riddler was hiding things throughout the game for the purpose of testing the detective, of really rattling the cages of the detective. This was the Riddler's way of, having fun and ultimately trying to show that he was better than the Bat. So you find these Riddler trophies throughout that are hidden in various places, but not only are there Riddler trophies, they're also hidden throughout the game are things like tapes, audio tapes of interviews from the various Arkham inmates. There are these totems, these stone-like tablets they feature the history of the Arkham family. And when you find them, they have like script written all around them, and we hear that as when Batman's analyzing it, we end up hearing that in the voice of the Arkham family, telling a little bit of the history of Arkham and Gotham. And it's very cool that that's there. But I like that it wasn't just like randomly Batman's hearing voices. There was actually etchings all the way around that Batman could have been reading at that time, which didn't take me out of the game.
The Riddler riddles, man. The Riddler had these really great times where he would tap into the frequency he would talk to Oracle to, and he would give you a riddle, and you would have to try and figure out that riddle in that area and scan it. And once you scanned it, it'll send it to him, and he'll tell you if you were right or wrong. And I thought that was actually one of my favorite things in the game because of that.
There was one involving the Mad Hatter and his tea party. You go into the botanical garden, and there was a clue. I forget even what the clue was at this point, but you're given this clue. And
what time is tea time in Gotham?
There you go. What time is tea time in Gotham? And hidden in this botanical garden is a tea set that was left there. And you have to look for the clues. And throughout the game, there's little elements like that, little clues that are left throughout. And they're not all like that was an image. It was a simple image that was left there. They're not all that simple. Some of them are words that you're looking to find. Some of them are objects. Some of them are paintings. Some of them are – so everything's different. Nothing is cookie cutter about it. And that's what I really liked was that you really did have to feel like a detective. Yeah. And those Riddler clues, just something very small throughout, but it added a whole lot to the game.
Not only that, you also have, like, when you put in, again, detective mode, the detective vision, the sonar, whatever the vision's called, you also have these question marks you have to align with the dot. And it's also cool. Well, one thing, I have to be honest, this is one of the very few games that, in a regular game, this is talking generally as a gamer, these are called side quests. And what I liked about it is that it worked for this game because these side quest missions didn't feel like a side quest mission. With Batman, there's always something to do, and this game did a great job in presenting that. Like, there's a ride in Arkham, but at the same time, Riddler has something in store for Arkham, so Batman's dealing with the Riddler, he's dealing with the ride in Arkham, he's dealing with Joker. And this game, what I like is that it made me want to solve all the Riddler puzzles and find all these little challenges and, get the little trophies and stuff like that. I actually found them all. I did 100% of all the Riddler riddles and the trophies.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, it was hard, though.
I haven't done that yet, but I'm definitely going to. I liked what you touched on there, that it doesn't feel like a chore to do it. It's fun to do it.
Yeah.
One thing I like talk about story reasons wise for having something is the Batcave. There's actually a Batcave on site, but it isn't just like this random thing that's thrown in there and you're like, okay, why is this even here? There's actually a story reason. Arkham is more than one building. You see that main building that we're all so used to that's iconic, but it's a huge property with multiple buildings on the ground, ones that have the holding cells, but it would also make sense that there's medical facilities, interview and treatment facilities, research areas, and more. Because of the size of the property, there's also caves on the property and hills. And Bruce found a hidden cave on the property and utilized it as a base on there if he ever needed to in a riot situation. So that comes into play, it's not the full-blown Batcave with the giant penny that we're used to. It's more of like we've seen in recent comic books that he's got these little hideouts, these little bases to go to if he needs to go underground. And this is one of those like you need to go underground type of situations where he's got emergency tools and a link to the Batcave computer when necessary, which is utilized in the game. That's one of the awesome elements of having that facility there is there's actually a purpose for it.
And the explanation, he said, I built it just in case. Just in case. Like, he anticipated it, and that's the type of person Batman is. He always anticipates every little thing.
Well, with the type of criminals that are being housed in that place, and with how often they escape, you would think that he would say, I've got to account for the possibility of what just happened in this game. That what happens if a riot is taking place? What happens if they take over the place? What am I going to do in that particular situation? He didn't account for the Joker doing this. He didn't know the Joker was going to do this. But as a strategist, he tried to put something in place in case there was a major problem at Arkham. He had that there. And I liked that it wasn't an element where it was there saying, like, Batman knew that the Joker was going to do this someday. No. He put it in place. It could have been Two-Face. It could have been Poison Ivy. It could have been any of them. Or it could have been all of them banding together, which is, in some ways, an element we're sort of seeing here, except the Joker's really pulling the strings and the other ones are just kind of caught in the crossfire, which I liked that, too. I didn't feel like they were all working for the Joker.
No, I think Poison Ivy made it clear. I don't care about you and your plans. I'm doing this for my babies, which are her plans. You know, let's talk about the boss fights, actually. One of the great things about that is that, as we said earlier, with previous Batman games, it's just a regular beat-em-up. Okay, there's a boss, punch him a few times, and that's it. And what I loved about this game is that the boss fights were so fantastic because they weren't rush fights. You know, Batman had everything planned out. Let's say, for example, the boss fight with Bane. He had to trick Bane. You had to, when Bane was charging at you, you have to hit him with a batarang to blind him, jump out the way so that he can hit the wall, so that you can jump on top of him and pull the plugs that are feeding the venom into him. Same thing with Killer Croc. You don't fight Killer Croc. You have to lure him into a trap and things like that. I thought that was great because that is how Batman would take out these villains. It's not just, okay, let me go in half-cocked and just punch him in the face. No, it's very careful.
Talking about that Killer Croc battle, too, that was one of the most intense. You think about luring him in a trap. Okay, what's so action-packed about that? That was one of the harder boss battles and one of the more intense ones because Croc kept coming at you in different ways. Sometimes he would pop up out of the water, and he had a collar around him that was a security collar, and you would have to actually hit the security collar to knock him back into the water. But then there were other times where he would do that like 5 or 6 times. You didn't know where he was coming from. Then all of a sudden he would start destroying you were on these platforms in the sewers. And he'd start destroying the platforms underneath you. And you had to run away to make sure that he didn't obviously destroy you on one of those platforms and take you down and drown you. So it was great because there was an intensity there to even trap him. It was one of the longer battles because you were trying to escape the sewer and lure him back to a trap, and the sewer was huge.
Not even that. You were trying to get something from his lair. Mm-hmm. And it was very creepy. I mean, it really was that. It was one of the creepier fights. I mean, honestly, when he came at me, I didn't know what to do, so I ran the opposite way.
Uh-huh.
And I had to figure it out. And I'm like, okay, what? Do I punch him? And all right, I have to throw the batarang at him. So it took me a few tries to figure out what I had to do there.
You know what I loved about it, too? You were in a maze that remained a true maze. Yeah. Because a lot of times in games, as you explore a maze, the game kind of automatically gives you a map of it.
There was no map.
Right. They explained that the places that Batman was able to map out were because Oracle had the schematics. Well, there are no schematics to this underground sewer. And she tells him that. He uses this sonar device basically as a way to alert him as to how to get back. But you'll come to crossroads and you have to figure out, am I supposed to go forward, left, right? What direction do I go in? Because a lot of times you're hitting a true crossroad where you've got a 4-way stop and you're not sure which way you're supposed to go. And a lot of times you'll make a mistake and you've got to retrace your steps and go back. I loved that feel to it that you had to really get out of a true maze using only the gadget that Batman had left behind. That to me was another element that made it feel like very much like you were in Batman's world and that you were relying on, because Oracle even compliments him on the fact that, oh, you left behind that sonar there as a trick as a way to get out of there. And I love that again, story-driven reasons as to why you would be doing these things. You talked about the Bane boss battle. I want to jump back to that just real quick. The Batman and Robin film. I was a fan of the original Batman film series, but there was a decline as they went along, certainly in storytelling quality, I think. They had some great moments in them, but they also did some baffling things. Bane is a great example in Batman and Robin of a baffling choice. What they did, they made him this mindless, jacked up thug, but they never touched on the elements of who Bane was in the comics. In this one, because of the nature of this new Venom that they made, Bane becomes a mindless, jacked up thug, like we were talking about in that boss battle, but there's a storytelling reason why that happens. He was being experimented on by Dr. Young. You actually encounter Bane that we're used to, who is actually, at the mercy of what Dr. Young had been doing to him, and then he's jacked up with this new Venom, which is what does this to him. So you're like sitting there like, and I'm looking at that and I'm like, geez, Batman and Robin the film could have learned something from this. Because there's nothing I'm angry about with any of this moment. This is perfect. It explains why he's a mindless zombie right now, why he's this jacked up freak that's just trying to kill you. Because of what he's been jacked up with at that moment. It's not the Venom that we're used to. It's been modified in a certain way to cause this problem, and we actually do get to see the man we're used to before that happens. That was perfect. It was absolutely a great storytelling reason to then utilize the overwhelming strength of Bane to have that character in that role, and we all want to fight Bane anyway.
Yeah, not even that. I think after that boss battle, I think one of the coolest things was he's walking away. Batman's walking away with Commissioner Gordon, and he's talking to him, but he's doing something on his bat computer on his wrist, but you don't know what it is. And then when Bane gets him, he's like, "Oh, what? I forgot what the lines were." And then Batman just uses the Batmobile to like knock him into the river or something. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, it was. He had basically known that Bane was knocked out, but not down. And you're right. It was a great shot of the Batmobile being used. His Batmobile and Batwing both make appearances a couple of times in the game for, again, storytelling reasons. There's not a Batmobile driving sequence in this game, for example, because it wouldn't fit the game. It makes no sense. But to use the Batmobile in that type of situation, because it was on site because we saw it in the opening, it makes sense to have that thing brought in for the purpose of helping him take out somebody that realistically, with the stuff that Bane was jacked up on, Batman's not going to go toe-to-toe with him in a traditional sense. Did you lose to Bane at all?
I did a few times, yeah.
I love the first time that you lose to him, he picks you up and breaks your back.
Oh, yes, that was so great. I started laughing. That was actually, each one of them, every time you lose, they all have like a little, depending on like if you're fighting a boss, they have a really interesting thing. But yeah, that's actually one of the better ones.
And not only do they have an interesting thing, they have more than one interesting thing. Because that happened with Bane the first time, but then there was a couple different... I lost to Bane more than once. And so I got to see that, okay, that's very cool. There's more than one way that the character responds to you after you've lost to them. It's not all... Like, we didn't see Bane break our back like 25 different times.
No.
That was something... Not enough games consider the fact that, okay, it's going to get really annoying to hear the same stuff over and over again. They actually had a rotation of a few different ways that you would die per character.
I like the Joker ones. Oh, it's a little bad asleep. Someone finish him off. And my personal favorite, I salute my fallen enemy. You're like, what?
And I was laughing out loud so many times in this game. We'll talk about Harley Quinn a little bit. Her boss battle involves 3 basically fenced-in electrified floors. As you can guess, she's smitten with the Joker, who uses her to accomplish his goals and help gain control of Arkham. Of course, you have to wonder what happens if she fails him, and we get to see this great boss battle where she's sending thugs into the room, but it's not a typical thug fight that you've been used to in the game. She periodically is electrifying one of 3 floors to make the battle a little more interesting. So all of a sudden, you'll see the thugs start trying to run away from you because they know it's coming. They'll climb over this little fence to get to the other side, and you can. It's great because you can knock some of the thugs onto the floor. You can,
And she did like that, yeah.
yeah. Oh, it was great. And you talked about using the gadgets. That's a great example of, like you said, you cheated. Now, it was really you were playing smart. You were utilizing the floor elements to your advantage as well. I used things like the grapple gun. I'm sure you did too. It was great to shoot across long distances, pull these guys down with the grapple gun.
Yeah. Or knock them out with the batarang and then just go to the other side, and then when they got up from unconsciousness, they'll get electrocuted.
Right, especially the ones with the guns. A lot of times you can get really smart because of the fact that your goggles let you know which thugs are armed and which ones are not armed. You can, and which was all calibrated when he was talking to Oracle. I love that it was zooming in and on the bullets and on the guns and the way that they operate. I love the fact that you could then pick out and say, okay, if I'm going to throw a batarang, I want to hit the guy that has the gun because that's going to give me an advantage that I don't have to deal with some guy shooting at me while I'm fighting 3 people.
Yeah.
So I loved the strategy elements of the game. And again, you and I bet you if we could probably talk for 5-6 hours about the way we solved this game. I guarantee you there are multiple situations where you and I probably played them completely differently. And if we went through and played it again, we probably both would play it a new way than we did previously, but again would be different in how we handled it. That kind of freedom that was in this game was, to me, so engaging as far as which thugs we'd attack first, why would we attack them first, which way we'd assault an area. I loved that you could go into these big wide open spaces with guard towers and things like that. You could stick to the ground and try to sneak all the way through it without attacking anybody if you wanted to. Or you could go high, take out the people in the guard towers, then go through the top, stay above everybody so they didn't see you coming, and you could escape people that way. Or you could just go in and take down everybody, starting at either the ground or the towers and work your way up. I loved the snipers.
Oh, I was so shocked when I was like, wait, who's shooting me? Where'd you come from? Oh, all right, he's up there.
Joker, to make the thing more interesting, all of a sudden gets snipers up on the guard towers. And it was again, Joker, this whole thing was a game to the Joker. It was one big joke. So he kept doing different things to impede you, but also for his own entertainment. And everything was a joke to him. He was laughing at it. And that to me I so totally felt in the zone, like I was in a Batman game.
One thing I want to go back on, a little bit back on Harley Quinn. Mm-hmm. Her redesign was great. I liked it a lot. She had this, instead of the classic black and red suit, she had this really, and I'm going to be a guy here, this really hot nurse outfit with the pigtails and the little, because again, she was Dr. Harleen Quinzel, so she had a variation of the original Harley costume and a new nurse thing, and I thought it was pretty cool.
But the one thing about that, too, was, they obviously did it to go the sexy route because they were doing more of a mature game. But the reason why she was in that outfit is story-themed. Joker and her have taken over Arkham Asylum. She's dressed like a nurse in the asylum. Yeah. And that, to me, was what totally fit. It wasn't just doing a redesign for the sake of doing a redesign with no connect to the story. There was a story connect to it. So I'm like, okay, this totally works for me. Whereas, I'll be honest with you, I'm the type of fan that I probably would have been annoyed by a redesign for no reason. Mm. And that, I was like, obviously with Poison Ivy and her, they went a little sexier with the characters. And Poison Ivy totally fits to go sexy with, because anytime she's drawn by a different artist, they try to put their own take on what it is about her that's so attractive. And that is part of the attraction to her. There's a little bit of a sexy look about Poison Ivy. Totally worked with me on that one. Harley Quinn, great example, though. She would dress up to theme, again, to try and get the attention of the Joker. Look, I'm playing your game with you. And look how well I'm playing your game with you. I'm doing everything she can to be a little more over the top, doing everything she can. That was Harley. I love her as a character. When she is well written, Harley Quinn is an absolute laugh riot. Listening to her tapes, her interviewing the Joker back when she was Dr. Harleen Quinzel, And again, we get to a little glimpse at how that relationship developed in those audio tapes. Those audio tapes, to me, I listened to every one of them, and I loved every second of listening to them because you actually get to hear interviews with Killer Croc, with the Joker.
Oh, yeah.
You get to hear Harley Quinn, Poison Ivy, Zaz. And wait, not only do you hear Zaz, you hear a situation where Zaz starts off being interviewed after he's just been captured, and Zaz escaping and seeking out one of the doctors that had previously been interviewing him.
Yeah.
And we actually get a audio view of what that whole situation went like before he was recaptured and brought back again.
Not only that, you also get to hear and this is a spoiler also, one of the audio tapes is how Harley stopped being Dr. Harleen Quinzel and sided with the Joker.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought that was pretty good. You also have they had Riddler tapes also, right?
Yes.
You get to see like more into the psyche of who the Riddler is and why. And yeah, those audio tapes were really good.
I love seeing Scarface, even though you only see him briefly.
That was funny though.
The Joker got a hold of Scarface, not the ventriloquist, but Scarface, and made his own modifications to Scarface to make him a little bit of Joker's sidekick. But I love that when Joker utilized him, he actually utilized him as if he was Scarface now working for the Joker or working with the Joker.
Yeah.
To the point where he'd blame Scarface when something went wrong.
The puppet on the floor when you got mad at him.
Yeah, it was great. It shows the insanity of that character.
Oh, I just wanted to talk about one character I've been dying to talk about, which is actually my complete favorite in this whole
you
game.
got to be going to the Scarecrow because that's where I was going.
Oh yeah. I loved the Scarecrow because I don't know if you took this. They gave him a really big Nightmare on Elm Street feel.
Oh yeah.
It felt like, and down to the dreams, the nightmares, and his look with the injections on his fingers. And when you first see him, you don't really know it's him. You start to kind of figure it out on your own. But you see Batman walking down a hallway, and the hallway starts getting longer and more twisted. And you see the body of Commissioner Gordon, and you think he's dead. And then as you're going on, you start seeing like your dead parents, and it was...
Well, you see all of Crime Alley. And you actually witness the parents being killed.
That's after. That's the second time you see Scarecrow. The first time, I mean, when they're in the body bags.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, when you actually see their dead bodies, you're right. Yeah,
you see their bodies, and they're like, "Oh, why couldn't you save us? Oh, you're a coward." It was like, oh, it was really creepy. You walk into the room, and it felt like Nightmare on Elm Street because you have all these. You're in the morgue, and you have all these dead bodies. Turn around, leave. Turn around, leave. It was really creepy.
And you go into the morgue multiple times. Yeah. Because when you leave one door, you wind up in it again. And it was like you couldn't escape it. One of the things that I liked is you got to see what it does to you outside of your head, what you visually see. But we also got situations where, at least I took it, that you got to see what was going on inside somebody's head as they were battling for sanity. Because those moments where he was battling Scarecrow, I took that, I don't know if you agree with me or not, I took it as that was going on inside Batman's head. In a way it was. In a way, I took it as how it always is. It's because every time he got out of a boss fight, if you notice in the nightmare sequences when he fought someone, when he snapped out of it, there were a bunch of unconscious thugs on the floor, and you're like, how'd they get here? But there's the moments in it where you like shine a light.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
and I took that as it was finally Batman realizing that this man was doing it to him. And that's when he becomes, like you said, you'd actually see him there then, in the real world, in what would be our reality. I liked that shining of the light was like a metaphor for Bruce kind of coming to coherence and recognizing what's actually going on around him. And what I liked, too, is the Scarecrow is not a one-time battle. We actually do see in one of the hidden areas and it's obviously because you got to all the Riddler areas, one of them is Scarecrow's little mini hideout in Arkham. He finds this little hole like in the wall that he turns into. It's like a mini cave. Basically you have to squat to get in there. But he has in there the Scarecrow had schematics of Arkham. Not only did he have schematics of Arkham, which would explain why he was able to do multiple attacks on you, but he has multiple pictures of Batman, and he's using that to set up traps for Batman. I love that it wasn't anything as far as there was nothing to do in there other than to discover it. But when you look around in there, you're like, that is a very cool story element that we just got to see that was totally, as far as gameplay end, you didn't need that for any reason. But as far as immersive environments, to make it to explain that this guy was holed up in this place and actually made a plan that he has been unleashing on you all the way through, that this isn't just some random happening, it to me added another level of depth to this game. And that to me was, I think, the key. We're used to comic books having these great levels of depth where we start to think even outside them as far as beyond what the writer originally put on the page. This game had every bit of those elements where I was thinking beyond what the storytellers did, what Dini did, and the game creators did as far as crafting this world. And I was thinking through things in a way that I would a comic book. That, to me, I also thought was a strength.
Yeah, and not only that, it's also going back to the battles. What one more thing that I liked also is in the last one where you see when one of the nightmare scenes that I liked is that I thought the game messed up. I don't know if you did also.
Oh, yes.
The third time. And when you're going, you're like, did I just mess up my game? And I thought I really messed it up because I've been playing for hours. And I'm like, oh, man.
They play with they play with the gamer's head.
Yeah, they start playing with the actual gamer's head, and you're like, okay. But then you realize, and then the game starts over, and you're like, oh, great. But then you kind of figure something's wrong because when they show the bat light from the beginning, it's upside down. Mm-hmm. And it's Joker taking Batman into Arkham Asylum. And I thought that was really great. But
then Batman, very similar to how Joker was playing off of Batman, Batman's playing off the Joker in this one. And you realize, like, at first I thought, okay, because it seems like you're controlling the Joker, which you sort of are. But then the point of view shifts, and you realize what you're really seeing then is the whole situation through Batman's eyes, and that he is being dragged in as the prisoner. And in the world that he feels right now, in Arkham, he actually is the prisoner in Arkham right now. As you're playing the game, the inmates have taken over the asylum. And that's what Batman's trying to combat. So you actually get to see that.
That's a very good point. You're right. Not only that, yeah, and then right after that, it's insane. And you have Joker walking in with Scarecrow and Harley bringing you in, and then Joker shoots you. I don't know, and then it says, oh, if you got to dodge the bullet, retry. But then you come out of a grave, and you see like these whole bunch of Batman personas in cages.
Then there's one that's even chomping on like something.
A rat. He's eating a rat in the corner. You're like, what's wrong with that one? It's insane.
So he's seeing distorted versions of himself that are basically trapped in this world, which I think at this point, one of his fears was being trapped in this asylum, the way that the inmates have overtaken it. Because Scarecrow, basically, I love that the reason for that storyline is Scarecrow kept jacking him with the fear toxin. Mm-hmm. He kept injecting him with it as Batman was combating it. And Scarecrow was getting frustrated because he's like, how are you... What kind of man are you that you are continuing to combat this as, I'm taking you further and further in, deeper and deeper in? Because he's like, what I'm hitting you should kill you. Yeah. And that, to me, that frustration of Scarecrow really, it again, made me feel like, wow, I am really Batman in this. This is awesome.
It would have been really great, but then again, that's me being a little fanboy right now, is if he was wearing the Batman Observer costume during that scene.
Oh,
because he was a little bit insane, in terms of that nightmare. But just me.
Oh no, I'm with you. One other thing I want to talk about: which version of the game did you get? Did you get like the regular version, or did you get the collector's edition?
I wanted to get the collector's edition, but being that school was literally about to start the next week, which was last week, I decided to get the regular one. I really wanted the collector's edition, but I thought about it slightly. I was like, all right, mostly collector's editions are $80.
Right.
And if it was $80, I would have gotten it, but $100 just to get a Batarang. And to be honest, the one thing I was really interested in was the DVD with the interviews, believe it or not. And I decided to wait. So.
And you know what? As far as for the game goes, for anybody who didn't get the collector's edition, game elements, there were some bonus challenge stages. But as with any collector's edition, usually as downloadable content down the road that you can purchase, either from the Xbox Live or from the PlayStation Network, I'm sure you're going to be able to purchase those down the road for
positive. Well,
yeah, they've traditionally done that. There's on the PlayStation version right now there is the Play as the Joker, which is a free download.
It's fun.
It's great to be able to play through, and there's multiple challenge levels that unlock as the Joker as the game goes on. But here's what the collector's edition came with. I did end up forking out for the collector's edition.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Cool. It comes with the journal of Dr. Penelope Young. and it's wrapped in this leather like binder that has the Arkham logo on it.
That's really cool.
Inside that journal, it's analysis of all the villains in Arkham. It also is analysis of the Warden, Batman, and when I say all the villains in Arkham, it's not just the villains that you combat in the game. You know, the major villains that we're used to. It's also some of the major villains that aren't in the game, or where you like walk into their cell and things like that, and you get to see elements like Two-Face, for example. She has an analysis of him. So there's in-depth analysis of each of the major villains that you would normally expect to be housed in Arkham. There's the Batarang that's used in the game as a display stand. There's obviously the game and then that making of disc that you were talking about. It comes with a sticker. It comes with the bonus challenge stages. The case that it came in was insane. It was huge. It was this enormous Batarang case. And I thought I was kind of disappointed at first because I thought that was the Batarang that they were talking about that was housed in, because it's cool looking. Don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking that case, but I was like, well, that wasn't what I was expecting. I was expecting the one that actually looked like the in-game one. When you pop the thing open, in foam is this Batarang from the game. So it's actually, and it's not like one that you could actually throw around. It's on it's attached to a display stand, but it looks very cool on display. So I mean, it was one of those that on eBay, if anybody maybe didn't grab it, and you're looking down the road, I'm sure that like those collector's edition items, independent of the game itself, will go on sale. So if you bought the regular version, they're kind of cool from that end. They don't do anything to enhance the gameplay. It's swag is what it is. It really is. And if you don't know what swag is, it's extra. You know, they're little extras that are kind of cool to have, but it's nothing for. I wouldn't, like, if you're on a budget and you're trying to do this, I would say go and buy the regular game, because honestly the game content is where it's at. But it was kind of, for me, it was kind of cool. I felt like as a Batman fan, because I've bought a couple collector's editions in games, and I stopped buying them for a while because I'm like, I'm not getting anything that I really feel is worth it. This was kind of cool for display items, and like you said, that secondary disc. So I thought I felt it was worth it for that end. It was pricey though. Yeah. It was real.
How much did you get it for, if you don't mind my asking?
You know, I don't even honestly remember. I think you're right. It was around the $100 mark for it.
I think on Amazon they had it on sale for $80 or $90.
I think it was $90. I think it was $90 at the time. I think I put $5. I got it at GameStop.
I got you.
Which is right on my way home from work, and I put $5 down on it at the time, and they said to me, "Do you want the regular or the collector's edition?" And I said, "What does the collector's edition come with?" And when they said Batarang prop, I'm like, "Oh, I kind of want to have that." So I ended up grabbing it for that.
Originally, I wanted that also, but I'm more of the type of person I am. I like seeing how things are made. Mm-hmm. So I was really interested in checking out the DVD, and I'm pretty sure I can get, like you said, I can get that DVD somewhere down the line on eBay or something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that I really enjoyed about this game, the ending battle with the Joker. And I don't know how we can't. We were just saying, should we even talk about this one? And I don't know how we can't talk about it, because it's another multi-stage battle. A television film crew comes in. It's one of the things that I like about this game is Jack Ryder, the Creeper. I loved little tiny elements, because they could have done, Gotham News or something like that, independent of the comics. But to bring in a character like Jack Ryder, as far as just the mention of that character being a part of that, was, to me, and Joker trying to flag them down, because of course the Joker wants the attention, and one of his psych profiles actually talks about that need for attention, his look at me issues. I thought that was outstanding. The battle itself was very intense, because the Joker gets jacked up with this venom, because I think you and I want to talk about it.
He looked, oh man.
Because he what he first did was he jacked up Batman with it. And Batman's trying to fight the transformation. The difference is the Joker jacks himself up, and he keeps trying to tease Batman into falling prey to it. I thought it was cool because of the story Venom. Yeah. Batman has been under the influence of a form of venom before.
Just to let everyone know, though, also before that, the venom was being spread to Poison Ivy's plants.
Oh, yeah.
And he wanted to use that cure to put it through the plants, I think it was, to cure everything else. But then he ended up using it on himself to prevent himself from turning.
And we'll have to go back and talk about Poison Ivy, I think, a little bit, because that battle, I think, is one we avoided. But when we talk about the Joker battle, Joker decides to jack himself up with his own venom, And you've got to do this intense battle where Joker's still trying to get attention of the helicopters to get on television. While that's happening, he's got waves and waves of thugs coming in to take you down. And to make the battle more interesting, as you start winning the fights with the thugs, he starts throwing presents into the ring. In the presents are different kinds of weapons or explosives. And the explosives sometimes will be wind-up teeth with a bomb attached to them that'll blow up, or they'll be guns, or they'll be clubs. And the characters that pick up those guns or clubs or things like that then become really dangerous for you because you're trapped in this enclosed ring with the Joker's big face on the bottom. It's basically like a cage match in a Joker's ring. It's a riot.
Yeah. It's also, this was what gave me a really hard time. And one of the boss fights, it was difficult for me because you have to wait for him to turn around to talk to the news to use your grappling gun to pull him down. That was hard because you have a whole bunch of thugs beating you up, and then if he turns around on time, you can't pull him, and then you have to fight more of them, and they all have like the shock sticks and, you know, machine guns, and you have to time your combos right, you know, because it's a really difficult fight. At least in my opinion, it was.
It was. Well, you know what? The thing was, too, there's like 3 stages of it. He gets these weird claws. And it's because of the fact that he's mutated due to the venom. And they get stuck in the ground when you pull him down with the grappling gun like you were talking about. And you get an opportunity then to start working the Joker over to try and take him down. Well, that's the first stage. Then the second stage, another wave of villains comes out. Now, I felt that with each successive stage, the villains got tougher. The thugs. Like, they sent out more thugs with weapons. And actually, it was the third stage, I think. Wasn't that when we started to see the guys with the stun batons being then thrown into the mix as well?
Yeah, the stun batons, I think they came in the last stage.
Did you feel that the 3-stage battle with the Joker, it got progressively harder? Like, the first one was not easy, but it was tough, but not as tough as the second one. And then the third one was that much more difficult.
The third one was... I think after the third one, it stays the same.
Right.
In terms of difficulty. And yeah, it was, I think the third one. I think those stun batons, because when you punch someone with the stun baton, it's hard. You have to flip behind them and then punch them in the back or something. And
right, because the stun baton almost acts like, because they have that there, they can put that up as a shield. Like hitting them when they're carrying the stun baton, it's in the way they almost use it as a defensive weapon as well. So they've got like this defense. You've got to really get behind them so the stun baton is not a factor. And I liked that strategy element of the whole thing as well. So it was a cool element of the whole thing. Let's talk about, we did kind of glance over Poison Ivy, and seeing as we're going so in depth into this game, that battle was so awesome. Ivy gets injected with, and her plants get injected with this Titan serum. They were testing it in the botanical garden on plants first. Because this is a research facility, obviously they were looking at ways that drugs and other elements would affect inmates. They were also looking for different serums and things, because these are the craziest of crazy people. So they were looking for new kinds of research and ways to handle their inmates. Her plants start basically causing almost earthquakes. Not almost. Later on, they definitely do cause earthquakes. But they're bursting through the ground all over the place. They completely change the landscape.
Yeah. Even her poison spores take over certain areas where you have to use your grappling gun, because if you go down there, the poison that she has from her plants, start affecting everyone.
And they'll kill you.
Yeah. Especially the plants that start popping out of the ground, and you have to be careful with them, because if you make sound, they throw little things at you. I forgot what they were called.
Well, they also overtake personal areas, such as the Batcave.
Yeah.
You're in the Batcave, and she's gone so far, and the way that she's in touch with the land and the plants in the island, she's basically taken the whole island over. The whole asylum area over, to the point where you've got like roots and things coming through the Batcave when you're in there, and you have to find a new way out. I thought that was kind of a cool way to change the whole landscape, and you have to find new ways into buildings that before were accessible through front doors and things. I liked that because it was a great Ivy story element. Her battle was a multi-stage battle as well, where you're fighting her at first, and she's basically gone inside one of her plants and using that as protection. This is a mutated plant that she's inside one of the flowers, and the flower covers her in this shell-like encasing. But in order for her to react to what's going on with you, the shell has to open up slightly. It's like an eye almost, in the way that it opens up. It's when she's visible there, use your Batarang to try and take her. And it was cool because, again, that felt like a very Batman story. She wasn't in some weird robot or anything like that. She was in a giant plant, which fits. I mean, we've seen elements of that before with Ivy, that she herself has utilized strange plant life in order to accomplish her goals.
Yeah, not only that, during that boss fight, which is really hard, you have to jump around a lot because the plants start grabbing you and squeezing you.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that's actually a really good touch because, again, Poison Ivy using her
Roots
plants against. Yeah, her roots against this.
It was cool because she dug the roots into the ground, and actually a lot of mini roots or mini plant life, tentacles, whatever, start shooting up out of the ground, like you said, grabbing you. And I think they were flowering, weren't they, as they were coming up?
Something like that, yeah. They were growing pretty quick. A quick question for you, and this is something that I loved, actually, because when you first see Poison Ivy, you talk to her at first. You kind of set her free. And when you do that, you're like, okay, you have to go do something. I forgot what it was. But as you're coming back attacking the plants, you can hear her through the speakers yelling at you, "My babies, what have you done to them? I'll kill you for this." You heard that? Or?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I took it as partway. You actually heard her talking through the plants.
Mm-hmm.
Roots would come up in certain areas and larger plants would come up. She was actually able to talk through the plants. And I took that as being part her connection with the plants, but also part the mutation that occurs during that.
Yeah, it's really, really awesome.
With the game, one of the things that we haven't talked about is the game has a lot of replay value because besides just the main levels, there's a lot of these challenge stages. The challenge stages bring in like the stealth mode that you talked about in the game, this predator mode. You can utilize that in certain levels to try and defeat thugs without being noticed in a certain amount of time. So I love that there's some timed challenge stages, but then there's also how many thugs can you beat in a certain amount of time, which is a way to work on your fighting and combo system. You can also play as the Joker in the PlayStation version. And I love that when you play as the Joker, you play as the Joker fighting up against the police and the guards, and even Commissioner Gordon at a certain point.
Oh yeah, I love how, and even then in combo modes when you're Batman, you're playing, you start fighting against Zaz and stuff like that.
Right.
One thing I like about Joker is that he has his own set of gadgets. He has these crazy goggles, these chattering teeth that explode, and this gun that has one shot. In Batman, when you do the silent takedowns, you sneak up behind him and you do it Batman-like. Mm-hmm. When you're the Joker, he'll sneak up behind you and he'll kick you in the balls.
Yeah.
And start laughing at you. Or he'll spray you with the Joker gas and knock you out. He's very silly and just starts pointing at you and laughing, and I think it's great. Even when he's walking, he has this really funny narcissistic walk to him where he stands up straight and starts moving his arms up and down and his chin in the air. It's fantastic.
This is one of, as a Batman fan, it's one of my favorite games of all time.
I agree.
Just because there was not, to me, a moment where I was playing this game that I was like, I've had enough playing right now. Anytime that I've had to walk away from the game, it's been very hard to walk away from because I've been like, I want to keep playing.
Me too. One thing that I love about this game is that for PlayStation, similar to the 360, you have the trophies, and in the 360 they're called the achievements. And with certain games, you can do certain things to get the trophies done. This is the first game that I've actually wanted to get all of them, and I'm close to about 70 to 80% done with all the trophies.
You want to actually participate in the challenges.
And not to be confused with the Riddler trophies, the actual achievement points like knock down 3 guards doing this, or defeat a certain amount of enemies using only silent takedowns.
Well, and the Riddler trophies are, though, a part of that as well. So doing the Riddler trophies will actually gain you some of those trophies as well.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, I don't want anyone to confuse, because we're both PlayStation 3 guys. I don't want anyone to confuse.
A lot of the PlayStation games originally, the ones that came out after the 360 games when the PlayStation 3 was first released, they took the trophy system. The achievements were basically the same, identical to the ones that were released on the 360. As far as performance-wise, I haven't played the 360 version. I've heard that they're almost identical. I've heard some things in the positive comment on the 360 end. I've heard some things in the positive comment on the PlayStation end. IGN had a great review of the game where they did their typical head-to-head, and basically they said that it's the same game. A few of the graphic elements, I guess, display better on the 360. They gave it to the PlayStation 3 because of the play as the Joker content, but they said otherwise, head-to-head, it's the same game. What are you gonna? Yeah. Which is great because I hate when a game is released. And I'm hoping for the Xbox 360 users that they get to play as the Joker as well, because I love exclusive content when you first get the game. I love when they, because they've given. I remember Soul Calibur had an exclusive Yoda on one and Darth Vader on the other.
Right.
But then later on, you could then purchase them for both systems, and so I hope that that becomes the norm. Whereas, okay, they give the exclusive content at first, but then all players get to play it. Because to me, it's kind of silly. If you bought the game, you should get the same content. So I'm hoping that. Can't imagine them not doing that.
There is, in the game for the PlayStation 2 or the PlayStation 3 version, there is a feature, Rep Below Challenge Mode, that says downloadable content. So we are going to get downloadable content.
Well, the Joker actually is downloadable content at first.
Yeah, he's one of them. But, I mean, one that you can select actual downloadable content. Like, when you click on it, you can actually select it. And Joker's not a part of that. It's more like on Challenge Mode.
What are you hoping for downloadable content? Because I actually wanted to talk about that. Because, to me, one of the neat features about all the new game systems now is that we can get downloadable content. The Wii does it, the Xbox 360 does it, and the PlayStation 3. With this game in particular, I'm thrilled that the game is getting such critical acclaim because I am left wanting more. And that's not because I'm unsatisfied. It's because this game could go on forever, and I would be thrilled. I have Burnout for the PlayStation 3. And to me, it is that racing game is an example of how downloadable content can keep a game interesting. It's worth purchasing the downloadable content. They gave a lot of free stuff, which I thought was fantastic because it was a great way to thank the fans for purchasing the game. But along the way, they added huge elements like a new island, for example, that you can race on. I would love to see in this game, and the reason why I brought up that game is I'd love to see a new story.
I was actually about to bring that up. Well, one of the games that I have is Star Wars Force Unleashed.
Yes.
And one of the downloadable contents in that, and they actually added a new one where you can play in Tatooine.
Yes.
I haven't gotten that yet, but they also have one where you're in the Jedi Temple. Maybe have like a different area where you're in Arkham, or maybe like a certain part of the game told through the Joker's perspective or Harley Quinn's perspective. More challenge modes, like more Predator modes in different areas that we haven't even seen in the game yet.
How fun would it be to play a Harley Quinn side story?
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I wasn't even thinking that, but the second you said that, she is so goofy. And in a different goofy level than the Joker. She has her own unique element. So it would be funny to play her, because the story you could do with her would be really twisted.
Because she was doing things behind the scenes, so maybe something from her point of view as well, like how she got to Commissioner Gordon, because she did have him up there. And
it would be fun to have that story told and actually be able to play through it and to try to capture Gordon.
What about you? Anything you want to check out? Or?
I know we're going to get more of these challenge levels, which I think are fantastic. And if that's all they give me, I'll be a happy camper because I'm already so satisfied. Honestly, if they gave us nothing else at this point, I'd be satisfied. New playable characters are always fun. You know, to be able to play as Harley Quinn in her own stage. And I like it. I like the playable Joker. I like that the playable Joker, you can play him in challenge stages where you're playing not Batman's enemies. You're playing as enemies there would be for the Joker. You're playing against the guards. That to me makes more sense. I don't want to play as like Zaz and play through the main game and fight the bad guys. I don't want to do that. I want to, if I'm going to play as Zaz, Zaz, I don't know if we're going to get Zaz downloadable content, but how fun would it be to play as Croc?
Oh yeah.
In the sewers?
Really creepy. Not even that. Have like a little prelude, like a little how Batman got to Joker. One thing I'd like to touch on, the ending of the game itself. After you beat Joker and everything, I just wanted to talk about the possible sequel, because it left it open-ended in two different ways. In the end, it shows that there's no rest for Batman because, you have the commissioner going, all right, you want to take a rest. And he gets a phone call, not a phone call, like an incoming cop transmission, Two-Face was just spotted robbing somewhere, you need to stop him. And then Batman gets on the jet plane and flies off. And then after the credits roll, there's a post-credit scene. Did you see that?
Yes.
There's like a leftover Titan batch, and we don't know who took it. We don't know if it was Killer Croc, if it was Scarecrow, or if it was Bane, because they were all kind of like tightened up the way the arm was.
Rather than that being for a sequel, I was hoping we were going to get some downloadable content that told where that is. But I'm not against that being a full-blown sequel. I guess kind of my wish for a full-blown sequel, this was told at Arkham. I would love if they did a full-blown sequel that was told elsewhere in Gotham.
No, I agree. And personally for me, like that whole thing with Two-Face robbing, I hope Two-Face, Harvey Dent, is the main character in the next one.
I'd love that.
Only because I am so attached to that character. I've been attached to him since Batman the Animated Series. I mean, and you see me at cons, I cosplay him.
Right.
For any listeners that are listening to Raging Bullets, if you guys have Sean on Facebook, I'm that Two-Face guy.
One of the things I liked with this game is they didn't try to force every Batman villain into this story, because I think it would have watered down the appearances of them. They utilized ones that made sense for the story that they wanted to tell. like any good Batman story would be. And then there's room to bring in a whole bunch of them. We don't have the Penguin in this one. We don't have Two-Face. You know, we can go on and on. The Riddler is there basically off-screen for the most part, you know, with the element of really setting up little mind games for Batman to play.
Yeah.
And hoops to jump through. So, I mean, you could even do the Riddler as a playable character. I mean, not as a playable, as a, you know, an enemy in the next game as well. There's a lot of options on what you could do. This, to me, though, should be a template for what you do for future superhero games, because they really got to the core of what makes a Batman game great. Warner Home Entertainment purchased Midway, and they got a lot of their development studios. I'm hoping that they take a look at a game like this, because obviously they're going to do it. They already mentioned there's going to be a sequel to Mortal Kombat versus the DC Universe, which I really liked the first time out. I thought that was a great fighting game. But as far as an actual immersive story-based game, this is really the best superhero game I've ever played.
Great. And
hoping that their relationship with Eidos and developer Rocksteady is one, or I'm hoping that the license was done in such a way that there's room for a sequel, that's already been in place with this development house. Because Rocksteady, to me, is top-notch in what they did in the game. They are really kudos to them.
Yeah, and Eidos, for those that don't know, they did the Tomb Raider games, and one of my favorite series, the Legacy of Kain series. Have you played those?
Oh, yeah.
The vampire ones? And, you know, once I found out that it was Eidos, I was like, a smile came to my face. Like, all right, you know, these are the guys that did Legacy of Kain and Tomb Raider. I think I'm in for a treat. I agree. I hope so, because this year so far, there have been a lot of... I haven't played the Wolverine game. This is Marvel, but I heard that the Wolverine Origins game was actually pretty good for a superhero game as well.
It's fantastic.
So, is it? Have you,
yeah.
you all right, yeah, you know, so things like that, it's like, I hope that they do that. Here's to looking for... I'm crossing my fingers here for. I mean, we have a good Batman game. Hopefully, a Superman game in the future that's worth.
So I was just going to ask that. I was going to say, what heroes do you want to see? Like, what DC heroes would you like to see in a game? Superman, obviously. I would love to see a great Superman game.
Yeah, me too. I've been waiting for one. You know, I'm still waiting here. A Green Lantern game. The thing is, with me personally, and this is my opinion, this is a great example that if we have superhero games, please base them on the comics and not the movie based on the comic, in my opinion. For example, like the Spider-Man games, don't get me wrong, I mean, I don't have that much of a problem with the Spider-Man movie games, but one of my favorite Spider-Man games is Ultimate Spider-Man.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I like that because it was based off a comic. This is no different. This game was not based on a movie, it was based on the comic, and I hope they do that with future comic book.
Marvel's games lately have been really solid. The games, you know, from the development studios that have been making the Marvel games. I liked Ultimate Alliance a great deal. Wolverine was great. Spider-Man: Web of Shadows, I really liked that one. That was another one that was that one I felt was based more off the comic books than anything else. Original story, brought in a lot of the classic elements and heroes from the Marvel universe. So I'm hoping that this game selling well, and I'm assuming this Arkham Asylum is going to sell well because of how well it's being reviewed, that I'm hoping this game selling well will be an eye-opening to, you know, hey, if you put out a great game off of a great property, people are going to want to play it. The immersive element, though, is the key for me. I've got a lot of hope now for the DC MMO when it comes out because of how great this was.
Yeah, no, same. I actually played a demo at the New York Comic Con earlier this year.
Yeah, wasn't that great?
Yeah.
That was another pick up and play game of the DC. I like with the DC MMO the fact that we're going to be able to create our own heroes, but fight alongside the heroes.
Right.
Which is a nice twist to be able to feel like we're a part of the DC universe. So gaming, you know, the next couple years of gaming for us, I'm keeping my fingers crossed because superhero games are on the rise.
One quick thing I wanted to mention about this game also is the soundtrack felt very Christopher Nolan-ish.
Oh, yeah.
And also the Easter eggs. Even though, like you said earlier, you didn't have all these villains, you still felt like you were in Gotham. You had Easter eggs for Hugo Strange. You had a little statue. If you look at the newspapers on the wall, you see things like Firefly got caught or something. Things like that were great.
Calendar Man cell.
The Wayne Towers on the far distance. Calendar Man cell, Two-Face's cell.
Basically, the space in the game, they did everything they could to fill the space with things that would make sense in Arkham for the Batman universe.
Yeah.
That, to me, was the pure joy of this game, was you never felt it, boy, I'm playing just a cookie cutter, like they took a template from another game and plugged Batman in. I felt like I was so totally in Batman's world.
What villain would you have loved to have seen and not in this game, but in an upcoming like sequel, because I think a sequel is inevitable. So, what villain would you like to see that they haven't touched on?
Penguin.
Penguin?
I think with his diverse umbrellas and some of those gadgets and tricks, it'd be fun to play against him. Two-Face, like you said, I'd love to see Two-Face. Penguin is a character, though, when utilized right, Penguin can be a very interesting villain to fight against.
Especially now in the books.
Honestly, more so than a villain, I would love to see a game with how much space they gave Arkham. I would love to see them take it to the next level and do Gotham.
Yeah. Oh, I was thinking the same thing. Yeah, I'd love to see Mr. Freeze.
Oh yeah.
You know, I was actually hoping I would run into him in this one too. You know, but I would love to see Mr. Freeze or things like that, or Black Mask, or even lower. Or if you're taking it to Gotham, you know, mobsters like Falcone or Rupert Thorne or stuff like that.
Depending on what level they pull from, it's great because there's a huge mythos to pull from there. Catwoman would be interesting.
Yeah.
Even as an ally. You know, I'd love to see some of Batman's allies appear. Like Oracle was a joy for me. Jim Gordon was a joy for me in this game because they made sense being supporting cast in this game. I would love to see supporting cast in the game that makes sense from the Batman world because it again just adds to the whole nature to it. I'd love to see a game that takes place more in Gotham though, because I would love to do things like drive the Batmobile out of the Batcave. This team has got a wonderful game engine going here that I can't imagine it wouldn't be easy to adapt it to brand new environments. So there definitely needs to be a sequel to it, and I'm hoping that if you haven't bought it and you have a PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360, please buy it for our sake. Because the more it sells, the better our chances of a sequel.
Yeah.
And the demo, I know on both the 360 and the PlayStation 3, you could download the demo for free. And the demo really speaks for itself. When I played that demo, when I downloaded it, I was in heaven.
I played that demo 20 times before I bought the game.
I did too.
It's actually really funny because my dad came over today. My dad lives in Massachusetts, and he came in and he was like, he saw me playing the game. He was like, "Oh, I was going to buy that game for you tomorrow." And he was like, "Yeah, I didn't buy it for you because knowing you probably would have bought it the day it came out, you know?" So that was actually... But I was actually playing it in front of him, and he seems to like it, you know?
The best compliment that I can ever give a game is my wife, if she's interested in the game, she doesn't like to play, she's not a gamer, she doesn't, play games in that respect though, but she will hang out and watch games that have a lot of depth, and she's like sat down multiple times and watched me playing this just because she was interested in the story and the way that it unfolded. Honestly, that's the best compliment you can ever give a game, is that it's fun to watch.
A lot of games nowadays, they're half, as I like to call them, they're so interactive, they're half movie, half gameplay. Right. Like my uncle who lives with me, he's like that. He likes to watch me play my video game. He's an older person. He likes to watch me play my video games when they're in cutscenes. And when I'm playing, it's like, all right, I'll come back when the story continues. Like, okay.
Now, ComicTube.
Yeah,
what have you released on ComicTube? What's coming up on ComicTube? Tell our listeners a little bit about what ComicTube is and why they should be checking it out if they're not already.
Sure. Well, ComicTube is pretty much actually, and I hope I'm not kissing your butt here, it was because of your show that inspired me into podcasting. It was because of Raging Bullets. And I decided to do a podcast that reviews movies and TV shows based on comic books, but also sci-fi stuff, a lot of geek TV. And basically, what we do is we try to review movies based on comic books, but we also have sci-fi and things like that. So far, we've released a Transformers 2 review, but we also do like TV show cartoons. We did X-Men, the animated series, a while back, 2 or 3 episodes on that. The thing that I recorded this week, actually, which is actually great that I'm here talking about it now, is that we did a Smallville retrospective from season 1 to now.
Nice.
Leading up to what we're looking forward to in Smallville. Every time there's a Smallville season premiere, we review that. Or if there's like a special episode like the Legion of Superheroes episode, we reviewed that. We'll review Smallville finales, but not just Smallville, also Supernatural, things like that.
Good.
So it all depends. Heroes also. So since coming up, it's pretty much fall TV season premiere. We're going to be reviewing Heroes. We're going to be reviewing Smallville. We're going to be reviewing a lot of that, but also movies. We have Star Trek coming up when the DVD comes out. So yeah, stuff like that.
I want to thank Leroy once again for joining me on this episode. The reason why we didn't have Jim on this one is because Jim hasn't played the game. I didn't want to put him in a position where he wasn't able to be a part of the conversation, and he and I talked about this long and hard, and he agreed because he felt he would have been kind of just throwing in, well, that sounds cool and all that, but not having a common reference point. So this worked out really well, and I want to thank Leroy for joining me for this segment. It also gave Jim and myself the opportunity to prepare a really cool Superman Codename Patriot episode that's going to be coming up next week, actually. And it might be at the end of this week. I'm going to try to get that one out a little sooner because Jim and I are planning to try and stop by the Pittsburgh Comic-Con this coming weekend, and we're still hoping that's going to work out. So we're hoping to record and publish that before we leave for the Comic-Con. I don't know if we're going to be out there Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. I don't know what days we're going to be able to do that. It's looking like the weekend right now. But I will post on the website what that looks like. So if you're going to the Comic-Con and you're wondering if we're going to be there or when we're going to be there, I'll post it on the website so you know when we're coming. So if you want to hook up with us, you'll know when to find us at the con. And we would love to meet any of you that are going to be there. I don't know 100% for sure if we're going to be there yet, but I wanted to make sure that people were aware. We might be hitting the Pittsburgh Comic-Con. It's one of my favorite cons, too. I've got a nice batch of cons that I really enjoy going to every year, and Pittsburgh's one of those destinations that I always like to hit, so hopefully I'll be able to hit that one. Our sponsors for this episode, once again, are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. It's a brand new month, and Vertigo has a discount over at DCBService.com. Cinderella from Fabletown with Love, #1 of a 6-part mini. Regularly $2.99. You can get this at 75% off, 74 cents. So if you haven't had a chance to read any of Fable's stories, this is a great one. It looks like it's going to be a real interesting miniseries. I've been excited for this one, and these are usually some pretty good jumping on points if you've never read it before, because they're self-contained stories, and you can see if that kind of universe is your cup of tea. And it's like I said at the beginning of the episode, Fables is one of my favorite Vertigo series, and it just keeps getting better and better. So if you haven't checked out Fables, please do yourself a favor and do so now. Speaking of InStockTrades.com, they have our book of the month, which is going to be Preacher, Book 1, the hardcover, issues 1 through 12 of the series, regularly $39.99, 47% off, only $21.19. If you missed that hardcover, this is a great chance to get it at a really good discount. And if you want to go the trade route, issues 1 through 17 are contained in volumes 1 and 2. The trades are regularly $14.99, 47% off, only $7.94 each, so it's a great way to pick up those trades as well. So we're going to be airing that probably a week after we're finished with 4 tomorrow. We're going to do a skip week after 4 tomorrow and talk about some of the current comic book releases and then jump into Preacher, because we want to make sure we stay with all the cool things that are going on right now in the currently produced monthlies before we jump into those big dissections of some classic work. So we are going to be getting to that, and I'm excited to talk about that. Also this week, I was working with Freddie E. Williams II, and we were modifying one of our episodes to turn it into a YouTube slideshow. And it's very cool. I was glad to have the opportunity. I really appreciated Freddie for giving us that opportunity to do that. And if you go to YouTube and you type in Freddie E. Williams II, the DC Comics Guide to Digitally Drawing Comics, or Raging Bullets, you can see the slideshow version of it, where you can actually see pages from the book if you didn't pick it up. If you were on the fence of picking up this book, I got it myself. It's wonderful. Definitely do yourself a favor and pick up a copy of that book. But check out the slideshow if you're on the fence, and I think the book pages speak for themselves as far as to why it's an interesting book. I know a lot of our listeners are people who either are artists, are looking to be artists, or are just fans who are interested in how comics are created. And this book, I think, meets the needs of all three of those audiences. So definitely consider picking up that book. We will see you next week with Superman Codename Patriot.
Bye!